It's up to 2 juries to decide murder charges against a mother and her boyfriend. A live update on Nightcast.
Plus home buying tips and tricks. Coming up, weather cooling off for 24 hours, then a warm-up.
Nightcast is next.
Now, Jim Brennan, Cynthia Fodor, meteorologist Steve Caporizzo, Dan Murphy with sports. This is 10 Eyewitness News Nightcast.
You buying a house? Do you know what to do first? Home buying tips and tricks.
And the Senate takes action on Bosnia, but still the question is exactly what they want President Clinton to do.
Plus, local troops move out in the search to find the body of Sarah Ann Wood.
Good evening. We begin, though, with a local trial that is the first of its kind in New York State.
A trial that could change the way murder is defined by the court. There are 2 juries deliberating right now, and reporter Vic Vetters joins us from just outside the Albany County Courthouse. Vic?
Jim, Cynthia, most murder trials are designed to punish the accused for doing something wrong, for that positive bad act. What makes the France murder trial so unique and so special in New York State is that she's on trial for murder for failing to act, failing to do something, failing to stop the abuse of her child, and that failure led directly to her child's death. Now, the 2 juries in this case have been deliberating for more than 2 hours now, and we won't have any results until both juries return verdicts. The trial is about what happened to this 2-year-old boy and who should be held accountable for his death. Should it be the man accused of beating the child? Should it be the mother who's charged with failing to prevent the abuse? In closing arguments, the prosecutor claimed defendant Donald Kimball struck the head of Todd Preble Jr. one night in December 1992 because the child defecated in a bathtub.
That's what he was doing to that kid's head. And that's depraved and that's indifferent.
The defense lawyer told the jury Kimball never lost control.
He did spank him with a belt. He grabbed him by the face to get his attention. He never lost control.
As for the mother, the prosecutor says Kim France failed to come to the aid of her abused son and get him prompt medical attention.
How could she look at him and she would look at this child and just walk away from it? Because that's what happened. And that's why I want to see full justice in this case.
Franz is the first woman in New York State to be tried for murder charges for failing her duty of care to her child. Franz's lawyer suggested the jury might find her guilty of lesser charges.
Maybe she failed to perceive what it was that was happening around her. That's a far cry from depraved indifference to the child's human life.
The jury charges lasted 3.5 hours this evening. The alternates were dismissed, and then the juries were sequestered, and we're told that they were going to stay at it at least until midnight. Back to you, Jim and Cynthia.
Any indication, Vic, how the jury's doing?
You know, that's very tough to tell, but around 10:50 this evening, the Kimball jury returned and asked Judge Harris to reread the instructions he gave to them on the difference between murder 2 and also manslaughter 1. And then around 20 minutes ago, the second jury, the France jury, asked for a reread of the definition of murder 2. It's tough to read anything into that right now, but perhaps they're considering both of those 2 charges very seriously.
And Vic, did you say that if one jury comes in first, we're not going to hear the results until both are done?
We're told Judge Harris will hold that verdict until he gets both decisions. So we won't know it until we hear from both the blue and the red juries, as they're told, or as they're called right now.
Certainly a little more complicated than normal. Thanks a lot, Vic.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Well, the latest wave of searchers for Sarah Ann Wood come from this area, and those people left today for the Adirondacks. 62 troops, including 7 women from the 105th MP Company at the Troy Armory, headed out today. Their 2-week mission is to help state police in Racket Lake find Sarah Ann's body.
I think that we have the manpower to do an excellent job, and I really hope that we can find a young girl for her and finally put some of the New York State residents at rest. It's been going on too long, and it's crazy.
Sarah Ann Wood disappeared from her home in Herkimer County last August. Accused killer Louis Lent allegedly told police he murdered Sarah, then buried her body in Racket Lake.
Two New Hampshire teenagers were arrested this morning in western Massachusetts. Last night, they led police on a high-speed chase, crashed a stolen car, then ran into a neighborhood, prompting a manhunt. Today, cops found them about 12 miles from the scene, walking along a road. And police in Schuyler County have identified the parts of a body found in a ravine earlier today. They say the victim is 38-year-old Kevin from Montour Falls. His head and torso were first located, then police found his legs 1,200 feet away. No motive or suspects yet.
Nearly 22 million Americans will be moving between now and Labor Day. And if you're early in that process, like maybe still looking for a house, there are some things you can do to make the process a little easier and maybe save yourself some money. House buying tips and tricks. And we start tonight with getting the financing together. Whether building a new house or buying an existing one, step one is to get pre-qualified for your mortgage.
Find out how much you can afford before you go out and look for the house. That's probably the best tip I can provide to you. That way you won't have a disappointment down the line.
First-time home buyers really don't have any idea how much they can afford, and 9 times out of 10 they can afford a lot more than they think they can.
Mortgage brokers, realtors, and builders alike say you have to know what your financial ballpark is. Your mortgage application will be decided by your income, an appraisal of the property you want, and your credit.
They can get a credit report, they can get all their verifications of deposit and income done, and it saves a lot of time later on.
Especially in today's environment, you really have to have some good credit background. Credit is very important.
And remember, the cost of the house is just the start.
Many lenders will charge a lot of assorted small fees that don't appear to be that much, and so you say, oh, it's only a $25 fee for document preparation. But when you add them all up, it makes a big difference, and there is a difference in the price from lender to lender.
So shop for your mortgage. There is more to it than just the interest rate. And don't put all your cash down in an effort to keep your mortgage payment low.
Studies have shown that people who really stretch have the most trouble making their mortgage payments and all their other obligations later on. The people who save more and then put less down tend to have less problems.
Because you will need a lot more money after you buy the house. Many new houses, for instance, don't come with driveways.
They do have to take into consideration that they're going to need money for not only that, but decorating, appliances if they're not included, and the lawn, the landscaping, sidewalks, any kind of fencing, a deck. But things like that can be added afterwards, and a lot of people don't want them in their mortgage.
Some other things to keep in mind. If you plan to move out of the house in a few years, look at an adjustable rate mortgage. If you're in for the long term, go fixed rate. Ask about a no closing cost type of purchase. And shop for a lender, for a realtor, and for a builder.
And they really should ask questions all the way through, because there's no question that's a stupid question. It's just that you don't know the answer at this point.
And if you've ever done it, you know there are a lot of questions to ask. Tomorrow we'll look at some of the questions surrounding the house itself. That's in part 2 tomorrow night, only here on Nightcast.
Now, one thing I learned in buying a house is to always go and check, if you can, with your utility company about what the heating bills were before whatever, because sometimes they can be a lot more than you expected.
Yeah, if you don't know the difference between the cost in electric heat or oil heat or gas heat, certainly it's wise to find out, because you can be surprised that first winter, as a lot of people have been. Myself included.
Me too. And speaking of winter and spring or whatever season this is, it kind of feels like winter. A little chilly tonight. Steve Caporizzo in the Weather Center to tell us what's coming up tomorrow.
You are right, Cynthia and Jim. It is a cold night with the winds blowing. Wind chills actually make it feel like the mid-20s in some locations. So it doesn't feel quite the way spring is supposed to. Let's check out tomorrow at a glance. We will have one cool day, but then warming up. 39 tomorrow morning, 53 at noontime, and I think temperatures will be flirting with 60 later tomorrow. And again, quite a bit of sunshine, some of those fair weather clouds developing. Where the clouds are not so fair, check this out in West Texas, more violent thunderstorms. What you're looking at is a funnel cloud. That is a tornado, which is not quite reaching the ground. When a funnel cloud hits the ground, it becomes a twister, and that's been the story in West Texas. Big thunderstorms and all kinds of problems. We will have the complete forecast and much more information for you next time around. Back to you.
And just ahead on Nightcast, Congress sends the president mixed messages on Bosnia.
And we'll find out what your morning cup of coffee and illegal drugs have in common.
I'm Ted Koppel. Coming up on Nightline, an inspiration to many, his life was a battle against disability, depression. The story of Louis Puller tonight.
Tonight's 10 Eyewitness News is brought to you by your local Jeep and Eagle dealer.
Earlier this week, someone burglarized a Colony home on Undine Street and made off with $10,000 in cash and property. Well, today, police arrested 16-year-old Michael Russo of Osborne Road in the town of Colony. He apparently gave some of that cash to some friends and then went on a buying spree, and that's where police nabbed him.
Radio shock jock Howard Stern has certainly made some waves with his run for New York governor. He was in Albany a few weeks ago to accept the nomination from the Libertarian Party. And tonight on CNN, Larry King asked Governor Cuomo if he's embarrassed by Howard Stern, and he said no.
Extreme in his expressions, etc. It's kind of interesting that he has a plausible opportunity to run. All he'd have to do is leave the radio station. He certainly has enough popularity actually to run. That says something about the availability of this system. Now, you can mock him if you want to. I choose not to. But what his candidacy would mean is, my goodness, you know, this is a democracy, isn't it?
In 1982, people told the governor he shouldn't run because he could not win. So he says he's not too quick to dismiss any candidate.
President Clinton has been criticized for his foreign policy, and now the Senate is doling out a mixed message when it comes to Bosnia.
First, the Senate voted by a one-vote margin to give the president some breathing room, giving him one last chance to convince NATO and UN allies to join the U.S. in lifting the arms embargo against the Bosnian Muslims.
We've got to lead aggressively and actively, but we can't solve every problem in the world by ourselves. Every problem in the world is not and will not be an exclusively American problem requiring an exclusively American solution.
Then the Senate voted, again by a one-vote margin, for a contradictory measure that calls on the president to unilaterally lift the arms embargo now. Its sponsors argued the Bosnian Muslims have waited long enough.
We have done nothing for too long, and we have seen the triumph of evil. Lifting the arms embargo is the least we can do.
Mixed signals? Some who voted for both measures said the Senate is on record supporting lifting the embargo, but divided over how.
I think it sends a clear message that in this country, the United States is on the verge to having a unilateral lifting.
Virginia Senator John Warner called today's votes a farce. He says it shows the Senate's inability to give direction on foreign policy.
And checking other news tonight, President Clinton is expected to sign legislation to help stop the violence at abortion clinics. The Senate approved the measure to make it a federal crime to block access to abortion clinics. It would ban the use of force or threats against people trying to enter the buildings. Supporters say more than 1,000 acts of violence have occurred at the clinics in the last decade, including bombings, arson, and murder. The House has approved